Contamination.
Good afternoon, Investigator Johnson. I hope you had a good lunch. Investigator Johnson, when your investigation started, you had never met Jasmine Pace.
That's correct.
You didn't know anything about her background.
That's correct.
You had never met Jason Chen.
No,
You don't know anything about his background.
that's correct.
Your job, what is your job as a crime scene investigator?
Document crime scenes, document, identify, collect, process evidence from crime scenes.
You cannot vouch for the integrity of evidence before you receive it, can you?
That is correct.
You don't know how the evidence was handled before you received it.
That is correct.
You don't know how the evidence was collected before you received it.
That is correct.
When you collect evidence, you must package it so it cannot leak through the container, right?
Correct.
You must package it so it can't be lost.
Correct.
You must package it so it can't deteriorate.
Correct.
Once collected, evidence must be kept in a secure area.
Yes.
Once collected, evidence must be kept in a secure area when not directly in possession of a person listed on the chain of custody.
Yes.
What is a chain of custody?
Chain of custody is normally a form that shows where the evidence has been transferred from one person to another.
And it shows who has handled it.
Correct.
It also documents how the evidence was transferred.
Correct.
And it shows how, so, like, documents might have been stored.
So I could, yes.
The chain of custody begins when evidence is first collected.
Correct.
The chain of custody may begin at the crime scene.
Yes.
The chain of custody continues with each transfer of the evidence to law enforcement, to the crime laboratory, and wherever else it might go.
Correct.
And you must keep complete documentation regarding this chain of custody.
Correct.
And there's a chain of custody log, correct?
Correct.
And you maintain that log?
Once it's submitted to property, then property and evidence maintains that chain of custody as far as who checks out items of evidence.
And the reason you do that is so you can ensure that there's no loss or alteration of the evidence prior to trial.
Correct.
So I want to talk about kind of the collection of evidence. Victims in cases can bring evidence to a crime scene without even knowing it.
Yes.
Suspects can bring evidence to a crime scene without even knowing it.
Yes.
Law enforcement can bring evidence to a crime scene without even knowing it.
Yes.
People visiting the crime scene can bring evidence without even knowing it.
Correct.
Victims can take pieces of evidence away from a crime scene without even knowing it.
Correct.
Suspects can take pieces of evidence away from a crime scene without even knowing it.
Correct.
Law enforcement can take pieces of evidence away from a crime scene without even knowing it.
Correct.
People visiting the crime scene can take pieces of evidence away without even knowing it.
Correct.
On direct, you talked a little bit about transfer evidence. What is transfer evidence?
It's when you have custody of an item of evidence and you transfer that custody to someone else.
Let me ask this, in terms of like blood or DNA, what is transfer evidence?
Evidence that is left on the scene by individual, person, or item.
And you can transfer that by touching it, right?
Correct.
And individuals can leave transfer evidence at a crime scene.
Correct.
Transfer evidence can include glass.
It could probably include just about anything, yes.
Including blood, right?
Correct.
Often investigators need specialized lighting and aids to help find transfer evidence, right?
Yes. Not always, but yes.
Because transfer evidence can be easily lost.
Yes, or not very visible.
And transfer evidence can offer information on how to reconstruct the events of the crime, right?
Code, yes.
At a crime scene, most crime scenes, there's often tiny pieces of fragments of physical evidence that can help tell the story of what happened, right?
Correct.
That's what your job is, to tell the story of what happened.
You collect the items. Yes.
And those items can tell a
Document the
story,
items.
right?
They can, yes.
Hair, fibers, clothing, carpeting, pieces of glass, blood, can all help tell the story of what happened.
Yes, they could.
These tiny pieces of evidence are called trace evidence, right?
Yes.
Trace evidence can be transferred when two objects touch.
Yes.
Transfer evidence can be transferred between evidence.
If proper precautions are not taken, yes.
Trace evidence can be used to reconstruct an event
Yes,
and help tell the story.
it could.
Evidence can be used to prove that a person or a thing was present in a place.
It could.
If you collect evidence carefully, is it true that a crime scene can yield a lot of information?
It's possible, yes.
And those samples can help tell the story.
Yes.
Forensic scientists examine physical evidence, chemical evidence, and trace evidence, right?
Yes.
And you have a variety of tools at your disposal to test these things.
Yes.
The importance of trace evidence, though, in the context of crime scene can sometimes be hard to understand.
It could be, yes.
And that's why you're here. You're here to help explain the collection of evidence, right?
Yes.
Hypothetically, trace evidence could determine whether an item or maybe even a body was moved.
Yes, it could.
I want to go back to transfer evidence. What's the difference between direct transfer evidence and indirect transfer evidence?
I guess the indirect transfer would be, say I walk through a crime scene, maybe something sticks on the bottom of my shoe or booty, and then I transfer it to another location in that crime scene.
So direct evidence is when trace evidence transfers from the original source to another place.
It could be, yes.
So, for example, if a bleeding person brushed against a tree at a crime scene, that would be direct evidence, right? Direct transfer evidence.
Yes.
Indirect transfer is when the trace evidence is, as we said, carried from the primary source to another place by a third person or maybe by an object.
Yes.
And with indirect transfer, it's important to preserve and document any kind of evidence when it's identified.
Correct.
We'll get that back. And if trace evidence can't be properly preserved and protected, it can be lost.
It could be, yes.
Contamination of evidence can be a very serious problem, can it?
Yes.
Contamination of evidence can ruin evidence.
Yes,
Contamination of evidence can jeopardize a criminal case.
it could.
And contamination occurs when something or someone is introduced to a scene that was not previously there.
That's possible, yes.
Contamination can come from people investigating the scene.
Yes,
You're supposed to evaluate a scene before anyone else enters it to keep it from being contaminated, right?
could you repeat that?
Sure. You should evaluate a crime scene prior to anyone else entering it to keep contamination to a minimum.
Once I respond to a crime scene, my job is to document it and collect evidence as how it is when I arrive. I can't account for how things are before I get there.
Because various people can contaminate crime scenes before you get there.
Yes,
Witnesses can contaminate evidence at a crime scene.
yes,
Suspects can.
yes,
Innocent bystanders could.
yes,
First responders can.
yes,
Police officers can.
yes,
Crime scene investigators can.
yes.
Is the most effective way to prevent contamination is limiting access to the crime scene?
Correct.
And evidence can get contaminated at any stage of the investigation, can't it?
Yes,
It can be contaminated at the crime scene itself
yes,
and at the crime lab.
I'm sure it's possible, yes.
Maybe going to and from the crime lab.
I think anything is possible.
You would say, it's a fair statement to say that everyone that comes in contact with his evidence has to guard, has a responsibility for making sure it doesn't become contaminated.
Correct.
So crime scenes are usually disorganized. That's why it's a crime scene, right?
I don't know if I would say disorganized.
When you discover that a piece of evidence has been contaminated, you need to document that, though, right?
The evidence would be documented how it is when I observe it.
And if you don't document any the contamination that may have occurred, that evidence could then be misleading.
It could be, yes.
And it could be misleading to investigators, right?
Yes,
And it could be misleading to forensic scientists.
correct.
Anyone who enters a crime scene is capable of adding something to it
Correct.
and taking something away.
Correct.
And anyone's capable of contaminating it.
Correct.
If someone doesn't have a legitimate purpose investigating the scene, they should not be allowed there, right?
That is correct.
And those who do have a legitimate purpose being at the crime scene should be aware of their potential to contaminate evidence, right?
Correct.
I want to talk to you about DNA, blood. Are you familiar with the collection, obviously, of blood and DNA?
Yes.
And we talked about how trace evidence or direct transfer, but DNA can transfer from person to person or person to an object,
Yes.
and that's called primary transfer.
Yes.
And because of these types of transfers, sometimes you can, for example, find blood in a room in which the source of the blood was never present.
It's possible, yes.
And other forms of DNA can be transferred the same way.
Yes.
Moist or wet DNA transfers more easily than dry DNA.
I would agree with that, yes.
Investigator Johnson, I want to ask you some questions about Blue Star. You're familiar with Blue Star?
Well, somewhat.
It is. You were asked a question on direct. Do you know the difference between Blue Star and luminol?
I don't know, we use Blue Star. Luminol is a little bit different, I believe, as far as the lighting conditions that are required and stuff.
And is luminol in Blue Star?
That I don't know.
Good question. How many times have you used Blue Star?
Probably about 15 to 20 times.
Over how long of a period of time?
7.5 years.
Blue Star is considered a presumptive test for blood, right?
Correct.
Meaning it only suggests the presence of blood, but does not confirm it. Is that right?
That's correct.
What limitations does Blue Star have in detecting substances other than blood?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What other substances could Blue Star detect other than blood?
I believe it can detect some cleaning chemicals, bleach.
In this case, you used Blue Star.
Yes.
Did you ever confirm the Blue Star reactions using a secondary test?
There was, again, they were only presumptive tests, but we have rapid presumptive tests. OBTI and hemostat.
Presumptive means not confirmed.
Correct.
So my question to you is, did you do any secondary tests to confirm the presumptive Blue Star test? And what are those tests that you did?
I mean, the swabs that I collected to confirm whether or not it was blood would have been sent off to the lab. I would not have confirmed those.
Have you ever had the opportunity to work with the Kasselmeyer test?
It may fall under some of our rapid tests.
Have you ever done a Kasselmeyer test?
I've done OBTI and hemostat.
Have you ever done a Kasselmeyer test?
I'm not familiar with that.
So you're not familiar with it, means you've never done it?
I'm not familiar with the name.
Why? So other than sending off the blood spots to the lab, did you do any other scientific test as a criminal investigator to confirm that it was blood?
Just the presumptive test.
Did you at least do a control test to ensure the accuracy and reliability of the Blue Star that you used?
No.
Isn't that standard operating procedure that you do a control test first?
I mean, obviously, we had a control test based on the visible blood that also illuminated.
No, that's the actual testing that you did. Did you do a control, a scientific control?
No.
Are you, if you're not familiar with the Kasselmeyer test, are you at least familiar with the Techman or Takayama test?
No, I'm not.
Those tests can definitively confirm blood. You know that.
I did not know that.
Why wouldn't you use any of these alternative tests?
All I know are the tools that we have at our use.
You documented all the areas that tested positive for Blue Star,
Yes,
and you documented all the areas that were negative.
yes.
At any point, did you see anything that was possibly blood that you later confirmed to be a false positive?
No.
You did 2 investigative searches at the apartment there on Tremont, correct?
We did multiple searches.
You did one in November,
Yes,
and you did one in June
yes.
of 2023. Did you use Blue Star on this, at the search in January?
No,
Did you ever spray any of the walls in the apartment with Blue Star?
we sprayed some walls and some doors, yes.
What walls did you spray?
I believe in the living room, and the doors for the laundry and the bathroom door.
You didn't do the bedroom walls?
I don't believe so, no.
You didn't do the bathroom walls?
And we did the shower, we did the sink, mostly the floor,
You didn't do the bathroom walls?
just the shower walls,
Just the shower walls. And then you said the laundry door?
yes.
Was there a Blue Star reaction to the laundry door?
I believe on the laundry door and on the bathroom door coming from the kitchen.
So between these 2 different searches, why did you have to do a second search?
Because additional evidence was discovered.
Why didn't you discover it the first time?
It just was not discovered. I know we searched under the bed.
But you didn't see that spot?
Well, that was on the back side of the carpet, so no, I wouldn't have seen that spot. And hand to me with the flashlight looking under the bed, did not see any discoloration at that time.
Was that because your investigation was rushed?
No,
You testified that over a 3-day period that you were awake for 51 hours.
yes,
Perhaps you might have been too tired to be able to find the spots on your first search.
it's possible, but I do take my time when I process things.
You had said something earlier. You said Blue Star can react with things other than blood. You said bleach.
Yes,
What about hydrogen peroxide?
that I'm not sure.
When you did your investigation, did you find cleaning supplies?
When we found cleaning tools, I'm not sure about supplies.
Did you find cleaning chemicals? Did you find any hydrogen peroxide?
I believe there may have been some,
Did you find bleach?
no, I don't believe so.
In your opinion, when you did your search in November, do you think anyone had tried to clean up a crime scene?
Yes,
Why do you think that?
based on the results of the Blue Star,
Can you please elaborate?
there was obviously presumed blood throughout the apartment, on the floors and the doors and on the walls. That was not visible to the naked eye.
And do you believe that to be blood, or could it have been cleaning agents?
I believe it to be blood, based on the reaction time and the longevity of the reaction of the Blue Star.
Even though it's only a presumptive test?
Correct.
Wouldn't the act of cleaning potentially spread residual substances, such as blood or those cleaning agents?
Yes, it could, yes.
And how would that happen?
When you're cleaning up, say, a large pool of blood and you're wiping it on other surfaces, that's going to transfer that blood to other surfaces.
If the carpet in the bedroom was damp from cleaning, could that have affected the Blue Star results by spreading and diluting any potential residue?
I mean, if someone had walked over it while it was wet and then transferred it, yes, it could.
Are you aware of anyone coming into the apartment prior to you?
I believe I was told that patrol officers had entered the apartment and that Jasmine Pace's family had entered the apartment as well.
Do you know how many total people had entered the apartment between the November 23rd and when you began your search?
I don't know.
Do you know if the carpet was damp when any of them entered into the bedroom?
I do not know.
Isn't it possible that the individuals walking through the apartment could have tracked blood, cleaning agents, debris, or any of these other substances across various areas in the apartment?
It's possible, yes. I mean, as far as the carpet being damp, I mean, as far as that specific carpet there, I mean, it was covered up with the bed, so I don't think any transfer would have came from that particular blood pool.
There was other blood spots on other parts of the carpet, correct?
Yes.
In front of the dresser,
Yes.
in front of the TV.
Yes.
There was blood spots not covered by furniture.
Correct.
Those could have been cleaned with, or those could have been cleaned with cleaning materials, right?
That's possible, yes.
And those spots could have been damp.
Could have.
Did you interview either of those two officers that went in?
No.
Did you interview the Pace family or Bean family?
No.
You didn't ask any of them if the carpet was damp?
Objection. She said she didn't interview.
Okay, withdraw. When you started your investigation, did you take the steps to limit the foot traffic into the apartment?
Yes. After completing my initial walkthrough, I advised the officer not to let anybody else inside the apartment for any reason. Because once I arrive on scene, it's my scene.
And why do you want to prevent anyone else from coming in there?
Just to prevent any disturbance of the evidence or any contamination of the evidence.
Were shoe prints or other marks observed in the Blue Star?
No,
You didn't see any footprints in the Blue Star?
I did not see any footprints in the Blue Star.
Did you speak with Investigator Crawford about your investigation?
Yes,
And you conferred with him about the Blue Star?
yes,
Was he present with the Blue Star, or when the Blue Star was applied?
yes.
Would it surprise you to know that Detective Crawford testified yesterday that he saw footprints in the Blue Star?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I saw a footprint, but it was a visible blood footprint.
Visible blood footprint.
Mhm.
Did that light up in the Blue Star?
Yes, it would have, yes.
So you saw a footprint in the Blue Star.
Yes.
separate. Did you find any shoe prints in the
I
Blue
did
Star?
not.
Except for that one?
Yes, the footprint is.
You can't definitively say that the reactions observed with Blue Star were not caused by cleaning agents, can you?
Based on my training and experience, I can say, based on the longevity of the reaction of the Blue Star and the intensity of the luminescing of the area is a lot different than if it was a chemical agent or bleach or some other item. If it's a chemical bleach or a chemical cleaning agent, it's not going to be as intense in color, and it's not going to last nearly as long. Seconds.
So you believed it to be blood based on the brightness of the Blue Star, correct?
Correct. And based on the other presumptive tests that I conducted.
And again, presumptive means it cannot be confirmed.
Correct.
And you did no test that confirmed it to be blood there at the scene, right?
Correct.
Were the patterns and locations of the Blue Star reactions consistent with the possibility that the substance were spread by cleaning or foot traffic?
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. Were the patterns or locations of the Blue Star reactions consistent with the possibility that the substances being spread or spread by cleaning or foot traffic?
It's a possibility. I mean, when we applied the Blue Star, I mean, it was pretty much everywhere, all over the floor, from the living room to the bedroom.
And
Different shapes, different patterns. I mean, the whole floor just lit up.
so all those people that entered into the apartment before you began your investigation, they had no effect on the Blue Star test that you did?
I'm not saying that.
What are you saying?
I'm just saying, based on the intensity and the longevity of the Blue Star that was applied, all I can say is that there's a possibility and probability that that was blood throughout the entire apartment.
And whether it's blood, cleaning agents, that all could have been spread by foot traffic.
Yes.
So I saw all these pictures where you have this yellow tape and this white tape for measurements.
Yes.
So the yellow tape is in inches, right?
Yes.
And the white tape is in centimeters.
Yes.
Do you risk any confusion by having two different measurements in the same photograph or in the same piece of evidence?
No.
So do you ever have to convert inches to centimeters or centimeters to inches?
No, I document the scene, I document the scales, the photographs.
Let me ask you about the Camry. The Camry, you believe that, what scientific test did you perform to believe that the suitcase was in the trunk?
Scientific test.
You stated that you believe that the suitcase was in the trunk based on those marks that we saw on the map.
I could not eliminate that as the item that left the marks in the trunk.
What scientific test did you use?
Measurements.
Okay. What was the measurement of the wheels?
Measurements of the wheels were approximately, like I said, this was not a critical comparison. I'm not certified to do critical comparisons of wheel marks. My job is to say, yes or no, could this suitcase cause these marks? I could not say this suitcase did not cause it. But I could say it's a possibility that it did, because it fit within the parameters of those measurements.
So if I understand you say, the suitcase. Could have done it. It could have not have done it. Right?
If it did not do it, I could say it did not do it because the wheelbase would have been way off or different and not consistent with the track marks.
But it's fair to say that you can't confirm that the suitcase made those marks.
Correct.
I want to talk about the search that you did in January. You returned there to do a second search, and this is approximately, what, 5 weeks, 6 weeks after your first search?
Yes.
Isn't it true that during that time the apartment could have been accessed by others?
If you know that, I would not know that.
Because it was not, the apartment was no longer secure after you finished your first investigation?
It was no longer active crime scene.
And people that may have accessed that apartment could have altered evidence that you collected?
Could have.
Could have contaminated that evidence?
Possible.
After 5 or 6 weeks, you'd agree that the scene could change significantly, couldn't it?
Yes.
And it did change significantly, didn't it?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did law enforcement take any steps to ensure the apartment remained undisturbed between your first and second investigation?
I do not know.
And it's possible that the evidence that you found during the second search could have been introduced after you had finished your first investigation.
It's possible.
You'd agree with me that conducting a search shortly after an incident is probably the most ideal time for preserving the integrity of evidence.
Yes.
And you're collecting this evidence to have it tested,
Yes.
because it's important for these items to be tested.
Yes.
But isn't it true that all the evidence you collected during this investigation, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Isn't it true that not all the evidence that you collected in this investigation was tested?
Correct.
Dr. Candace.
I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 149. It's a collective exhibit. What are we looking at here?
Okay, that's the light switch in the bathroom.
Was that tested?
I do not know.
What are we looking at on page 2? And if it's washed out, I can bring this up there.
Another suspected blood stain on the door frame.
Was that tested?
I do not know.
What are we looking at here?
Another blood stain.
Was that tested?
Are you referring to a presumptive test or?
Sent to the TBI crime lab to be tested.
I do not know.
Number 5, we saw this spot earlier. Was this tested at the TBI crime lab?
I do not know.
How about this one? Was this blood stain tested? What about this one? Was this tested?
I do not know.
Number 8. What are we looking at here?
More blood stains.
Were those tested?
I do not know.
What are we looking at here?
Possible blood stain.
Was that tested?
I don't know. As a crime scene investigator, it's not up to me what gets tested and what doesn't get tested.
Who's it?
My job is to collect and document the evidence.
Okay. And who makes the determination of whether or not to get it tested?
It would be the detective in charge of the scene.
Are you aware of what evidence was sent to the TBI and what wasn't?
I don't know exactly what all was and what wasn't sent.
Evidence gets tested or not?
No, sir.
So you don't determine which criteria of what items, you don't determine the criteria of what items get tested?
No, sir.
Would it be helpful for you to see each individual piece of evidence to determine whether or not it has been tested? If you got to look at the white tag on it?
It would be whether or not it had evidence taken from the crime lab on there.
Okay, so when the jury gets this evidence back, what can they look for to see what pieces of evidence were actually tested by TBI? Will there be a color sticker on it? What are we looking for?
I believe TBI uses orange evidence tape,
So,
but if they don't test an item, I don't know if they open it or not. That's a TBI
is
thing.
it hazard? Is that the orange tape you're talking
No,
about? Is this the orange tape?
yes,
So this is something that was tested by the TBI?
yes. Well, it was opened by the TBI. I don't know if it was tested or not.
I'm showing you what's been marked. We'll start with 159. What is this?
Sealed bags full of suspected blood collected in January. It's underneath the carpet on the subfloor.
Can you tell from here if this was tested by TBI?
It does not appear that has been opened by TBI.
What about this one? This is 160.
And saying it does not appear to have a TBI evidence tape on it.
What's the description of these two bags that you have in the red?
The location of where it was recovered was under the carpet on the subfloor.
I'm asking about on the red tags where it says description, it says sealed bag. What does that say next to it on each of them?
Swab, suspected blood.
Suspected blood, right?
Yes.
Because your blue star can't confirm that to be actual blood, so you have to put that.
Correct.
You see, this is item 156. These are the jeans outside the dumpster. Do you see that orange tag on here?
No, sir. No.
There's 157. These are the white sneakers. Were these tested?
Does not appear so, no.
Here's 154. This is the underwear by the dumpster. Was this tested?
No.
155. Sanitary pad. Was this tested?
No.
May I have that last exhibit? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I thought you had. This is 148. This is the gray knife found on Jason Chen's bed. Was this tested?
It does not look like it was, no.
So if items, thank you, sir. So if items weren't tested, I should take that up with Detective Crawford, not you?
I'm just saying, as a crime scene investigator, we don't determine what goes to the PBI lab or what doesn't go.
And to ask, and to inquire more about that, those would be questions for a lead detective?
Yes,
And in this case, that would be Detective Crawford?
yes,
And you had no decision in what items were being tested?
that's correct.
Does Investigator Crawford rely on you to determine what items to test?
Objection, Your Honor. If she was asked previously, do you have anything to do with the criteria to determine whether or not an item was tested? She said no. I was re-asking the same question multiple times.
I think this one was a little different in that he asked if the detective relied upon her or got her opinion on things to sense. While it's not necessarily her call, I think this question is different enough that he asks it over again.
Thank you.
There may be occasions when the lead detective would ask, but in this case, I don't think it was. I think it could have been based on the photographs and the evidence report for him to decide which items to send.
This carpet here, was it tested?
I don't believe so, no.
Was the padding tested?
I don't believe so, no.
Do you think the fact that you had to go back and look a second time suggests that you might have missed something or you overlooked it?
I think it's pretty obvious that something was missed.
And it was missed at your crime scene?
That is correct.
And are you confident that the evidence that was collected during the second search accurately reflects the scene as it existed at the time of the incident?
Yes,
And you'd agree that conducting multiple searches over time increases the risk of contamination?
it could, yes.
And that could lead to the misinterpretation of evidence.
It's possible.
One moment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. I'll pass it.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, defendant's contaminated crime scene.
Yes,
In fact, sometimes that happened intentionally.
yes.
If I can have CBD, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Would you describe moving a bed from one wall to another to have an effect on your ability to see the scene as it was at the time of the offense?
Objection,
Yes.
speculation.
I think it's a proper redirect based on contamination line of question on cross. So overrule at this point if it gets too speculative, but we're doing conviction.
And I'm going to put up on the screen a photo.
This is Exhibit 73.
Was this the same as it was as you found it on the day of the search warrant?
Yes,
What wall was the bed on?
bed was on the north wall.
And how is that in relation to that green and white tapestry that we see on the center of the wall in Exhibit 73?
The tapestry is on the east wall.
East wall. Where would the headboard be?
The bed was on the east wall, it would be right here.
Right? Is that document cam, Judge? Exhibit 173. I'm sorry, 117. You see that headboard and pillows?
Yes,
What wall are they up against there?
well, if the tapestry is on this, in the same location, it would be the east wall.
East wall.
Yes.
Ma'am, would that be consistent with the bed having been moved from the east wall to the north wall at some point between when this photograph was taken and when you made entry?
That was objection, yes. Let the question be asked, and you can object to it.
And when you made entry into that apartment?
Objection, speculation. Yeah, she wasn't there for this.
I think the question was, it's fair to conclude that the bed was moved between the time that the picture was taken with the headboard on the east wall, time when the headboard was on.
She doesn't know when that first picture was taken.
He didn't say that. He said when it's between. He said it has to be between the two times. So over.
That be consistent?
Yes,
Ma'am, were you present at the second time that you went to the apartment in Tremont Street?
yes, I was there.
Okay. And was the bed placed against the east wall?
Yes,
If I can have DVD. I'm now showing you 127-11. Is that the bed placed on the east wall?
yes, that's correct.
You see the stain to the left side of the headboard?
Yes,
Did you observe oil marks above the headboard?
yes,
Would that be consistent with the bed being moved in a position that it would cover up the stain that we see on this carpet?
yes,
Would moving the bed contaminate the crime scene?
yes,
What about mopping up blood? Would that contaminate the crime scene, ma'am?
yes,
If somebody were to remove items from a crime scene, would that contaminate the crime scene?
yes, it could, yes,
Cell phones? If they remove a cell phone from a location, could that contaminate the crime scene?
yes,
What about specifically a homicide scene? What about moving the body? Does that contaminate the crime scene?
yes, I'd say that alters the crime scene somewhat, yes,
Alters it? Makes it more difficult to figure out what happened?
yes,
Which transfers easier? Blood that's fresh and wet, or blood that, say, has dried for 4 days?
the fresh and wet would be easier to transfer, and more likely to transfer.
And just so we're clear, if the homicide happened on 11/23, you made entry when?
11/27,
Approximately 4 days later,
28 days.
you mentioned that their bleach can cause blue star reaction. Recall that testimony?
Yes.
And I'm handing you what's been marked for identification purposes as item 175. Is this an item that you've seen before?
Yes.
Where'd you see that?
Jason Chen's apartment.
Specifically, ma'am, where in Jason Chen's apartment?
Live on the couch.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been admitted into evidence as Exhibit 41. Do you see the item on this, or in this exhibit?
Yes.
What is it?
2 rolls of paper towels.
Okay. Do you see the packaging, ma'am? It says 6 equals 15.
Yes.
How many rolls of paper towels are left of the pack of 6?
2.
2? Meaning that 4 are gone.
Correct.
Move to admit into evidence 175.
So admitted.
How much bleach did you find inside Mr. Chen's apartment?
I don't recall finding any bleach.
Well, we see an item sitting next to the paper towels there in the center. Can you identify that?
Looks like a bottle of alcohol.
Specifically, do you know what type of alcohol?
Is it the rubbing alcohol?
Rubbing alcohol? Is rubbing alcohol bleach?
No.
No. You recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a sealed bottle, or a sealed bag containing the alcohol bottle with a Walgreens bag.
Same one that we see sitting right there, a Walgreens bag, you said?
Yes.
What brand isopropyl alcohol is this?
Walgreens.
I moved to admit 176 in the evidence.
So admitted.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been admitted into evidence as Exhibit 22, Walgreens receipt. Would you mind reading what the first item is that was purchased at 7 o'clock p.m. on the 23rd of November, 2022?
It has WALG, IPA, 91%, 16 ounce.
Is that consistent with the bottle of isopropyl alcohol that is now in evidence in this case?
Yes.
What about the last thing purchased on that list? What is that?
Bounty, appears to be bounty paper towels.
And is that consistent, ma'am, with the paper towels that are now in evidence
Yes.
as Exhibit 175?
Yes.
Okay. And do you see at the very bottom of the receipt that you have in your hand, where it says payment type, Visa, debit?
Yes.
Could you please read that number out to the jury?
435546 and then 4189.
Oh. Would you please compare that to the photograph that we have of Mr. Chen's credit card that we admitted into evidence? Part of that exhibit?
Yes, they're on the same numbers.
Same numbers. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I'm now showing you Exhibit 23, another Walgreens receipt. Would you mind pointing out and telling the jury what Mr. Chen purchased at 1:41 p.m.?
Hydrogen peroxide.
And the last item?
Hydrogen peroxide.
Would you compare the payment at the bottom to what's on the screen? Mr. Chen's Regions debit card?
Yes.
Is it the same?
Yes.
That purchase was also on the 23rd, wasn't it?
I did not notice the date.
Sorry. Showing you again, Exhibit 23,
Yes.
at 1 o'clock p.m.
Yes.
Now showing you what's been admitted into evidence as Exhibit 19. Ma'am, would you mind telling the jury what the fourth item down was that was purchased during that transaction?
The fourth item is asparagus.
Sorry.
Fifth,
Below the asparagus.
peroxide.
Peroxide. And that's not bleach, is it?
Correct.
How many bottles of hydrogen peroxide did you find in Mr. Chen's apartment?
I believe the one.
The one
Yes.
that we've just put into evidence?
Yes.
If I told you that item 176 was isopropyl alcohol, is that the only cleaning supply that you found?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So you never located any of the other bottles?
Correct.
Counsel asked you about a shoe print in Blue Star, and you pointed out that it was not a shoe print, that it was a footprint. Can you elaborate on that for us?
It appeared to be a footprint, no tread marks or anything like a shoe would have.
Okay. Like a bare foot, like if I took
Yes.
my shoe off, something like that?
Yes.
Was it a large foot, a small foot?
I believe I measured it to, from what was there, 9.5 inches.
9 1/2 inches?
Yes.
And you said it wasn't all there. What was missing from it?
It looked like maybe part of the toes.
So, would you say that the foot was longer than 9 1/2 inches?
Probably is. If they had toes.
If they had toes?
Yes.
Fair enough. Absent a partial amputee, longer than 9 1/2 inches.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, if I could have you come down and open for us the trunk container Item 172, the trunk liner from the Camry. Put it right here.
If any jurors need to stand up to view better, feel free to do so. Show the jury the marks that we could see on the trunk liner that you took measurements of. Are there two sets of marks?
Possibly two sets.
Okay. Now, ma'am, I'm going to pull out item 173. How did you compare the suitcase in item 173 to those marks?
I took the measurements I had taken from here and on a scale and marked the location. And I took that.
You're soft-spoken. I don't know if the jury can hear you.
I'm sorry, I took the piece of scale, a ruler, marked the measurements on here, and then I took that ruler to where the suitcase was.
And were they consistent in size?
Yes.
Were they consistent in the pattern of the two wheels?
It's kind of hard to tell. It's not
But there's
an
two,
ideal surface.
there's two sets of tracks running in parallel.
Yes.
And would these produce two sets of tracks running in parallel?
Yes.
Counsel asked you about a knife, number exhibit number 148. You mind opening that up for us? And would you mind pulling that plate cover off? Have the document projector here.
Sir.
How would you describe the blade of this knife?
It's a smooth edge blade. I think it was approximately 5 inches.
Would you describe it as complete?
Yes.
About how wide would you say it is, as far as from cutting edge to the spine?
Approximately an inch.
About an inch? Ma'am, I'm handing you, it's going to be marked Exhibit 177. Have you seen that item before?
Yes.
Do you know what it is?
Yes. Broken knife blade.
Have you looked at it?
I have.
Do you know where it came from?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a broken knife blade recovered during autopsy of Jasmine Bates.
I moved to admit it to evidence. Item 177.
Any objection? 77.
You want to take it out? Show me the jury. Can we compare the knife with evidence in 148 with the knife, partial knife tip in Exhibit 177? Are there differences?
That knife is significantly smaller.
Is it intact?
It is intact.
Does it appear as though that came from this knife?
No.
Any indication that this knife was used to murder Jasmine Bates?
No.
Thank you. Ma'am, do you do any forensic testing on these items?
No.
So you collect it but don't test it?
Correct.
Are you aware of whether or not items were submitted to the Tennessee Crime Lab for testing and comparison?
I know some items were sent to the lab.
Specifically, ma'am, Exhibit 141. I'm going to move the evidence signature that's about to fall off. Okay. To the red. Item 142.
Yes.
Were these items submitted to the TBI crime lab?
Yes.
Are you aware of whether or not they've rendered an opinion as to whose DNA is on those spots of carpet that you collected?
If I recall correctly,
Objection. May I approach?
Are you aware of whether or not a conclusion had been reached regarding those two items of evidence?
From what I recall from,
And not what they are. Do you know
Yes,
whether or
sir.
not they have tested it and reached a conclusion?
yes,
And just so the jury is reminded, when we're talking about these, the items that we're talking about, is that piece of carpet from the threshold between the bathroom and the bedroom?
yes,
We read stain at evidence marker 9.
yes.
And for context, ma'am, that square came from where in this photograph?
The threshold piece came from right here, and the other piece was over here in this area.
Was there a blue star reaction in close proximity to both of those items that were submitted to the TBI crime lab?
Yes,
Do you know how many items of evidence can be submitted to the TBI crime lab at a time?
I believe for DNA testing or serology, I believe their limit is 10. That's what I've been told by TBI.
And do you transport items to the TBI?
I have on most occasions, yes.
Sure. And is it usually 10 or less items?
Yes,
Okay. So we've got 2 of the 10 right here.
yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. No further questions?
Do you know the names of those 2 officers that went into the apartment?
Prior to my arrival,
Yes.
no.
They contaminated the scene, didn't they?
They could have.
No, I'm asking you. Did they or did they not contaminate the scene?
They could have.
Did they walk through the scene?
I'm not sure. I know officers walked through, and they could have contaminated the scene.
Did you ever watch their body cameras?
No,
Why not?
I don't typically watch body cams.
But it's your crime scene, right?
Yeah, I process the crime scene as it is when I arrive there.
If there's video of people going into the crime scene, don't you think that's important to do your job?
That's not necessarily part of my job.
Isn't your job to determine whether, isn't a part of your job to determine whether or not a crime scene was contaminated?
I mean, we would speak with officers, and we'd ask the officers if anything had been moved or anything like that.
Okay. So that means you spoke to Officer Braisted?
No,
Or it must have been Officer Creighton?
somebody could have spoken to them.
Who?
Or they normally tell us if anything has been moved. Normally it would be a gun or something like that.
In this case, who?
Nobody had informed us that anything had been moved.
So when you did your first investigation, you didn't know at the time those 2 officers had been in there?
I knew officers had been in there.
Okay. And you didn't talk to them before you did your investigation?
That's correct.
But you at least spoke to them after you did your investigation?
No,
Okay. Were you aware, or we talked about earlier, the family went into the apartment, the Pace family and Bean family, they went into the apartment?
correct.
Okay. They contaminated the scene as well, right?
They could have.
Did you interview or talk with any
As
of
a
them?
crime scene investigator, we do not talk to witnesses.
Did you talk to another law enforcement officer that interviewed them, that asked about whether or not they contaminated the scene?
If I spoke with anyone, it would have been Detective Crawford.
Wouldn't it have been helpful to know where they went into the apartment?
Like I said, that it was pretty much a shotgun apartment. It's pretty much one way in, one way out.
So it wouldn't have been helpful?
I don't know that it would have made a difference in this case.
The more information that you have about a crime scene, the better, right?
Of course.
So you had an opportunity, if not you, but another law enforcement officer could have talked to them to find out information about and contaminating the scene,
We could have you.
but no one did that. As far as you,
I don't know if Detective Crawford did or not, I don't know.
but he didn't talk to you about that. Then.
If something had been changed or altered, he probably would have talked to me about it.
The knife that wasn't used here, the silver knife, example number 11, that wasn't tested for DNA,
Correct.
and that was your choice or someone else's choice?
I mean, we could take a DNA swab of it, but ultimately it would have to be sent to the lab, and TBI preferred that the actual item be sent for testing.
So the knife wasn't sent, was a sample of it sent? A swab, as you said?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Was it ever tested for fingerprints?
I don't believe so, no. Because at the time, we didn't know if it was going to be tested for DNA.
But it wasn't
No.
tested for DNA, so then did you test it for fingerprints?
No, because I would not know if it was going to be tested at a later time for DNA, and I would not want to fingerprint it to compromise any
That makes sense.
DNA.
So whose choice was it to not ultimately look for fingerprints on it? Yours or someone else's?
I mean, ultimately, it's my choice, because I wouldn't want to compromise any potential DNA if it was going to be sent to the lab.
After you, no, you're misunderstanding. After you had already decided you're not sending it off to the TBI crime lab for DNA, and you're not doing a swab of it for DNA, why can't you do fingerprints then?
Once I submit it to property and evidence, I would have to receive a processing request to process it any further.
And that would come from the lead investigator?
Usually, yes.
Was that knife ever evaluated by a tool mark through a tool mark identification expert?
I don't believe so, no.
That knife was found on Jason Chen's bed?
Yes,
You have no idea who put it there.
that is correct.
Can rubbing alcohol cause a false positive in Blue Star?
I'm not for certain. I know that some cleaning chemicals and bleach can.
But as far as the alcohol that was found in Jason Chen's apartment, you don't know?
I do not know.
Just because you didn't find any bleach bottles doesn't mean bleach wasn't used though, right?
It's not impossible.
Things could have been thrown away?
Correct.
You obviously collect blood samples.
Yes.
Do you put water on it to swab it?
If it's a dry sample, we'll use distilled water
Why?
to prevent contamination.
You put, well, no, not the distilled part, but why do you put water on it?
To get a sample from a dry specimen.
Because it's easier to lift when it's wet.
Correct.
If someone cleaned up blood, would the blood not be distorted? You'd see, wipes and smears.
You could, yes.
And in the Blue Star, didn't you see wipes and smears?
I saw a lot of stuff in the Blue Star. I mean, like I said, the whole room, from the living room to the bathroom into the bedroom was lit up.
Did you see wipes and smears?
I just saw a reaction to the Blue Star. There could have been wipes, there could have been smears.
Did you document those wipes and smears?
The Blue Star reaction was documented with photographs.
Did you document the Blue Star reaction of wipes and smears?
No.
If you're cleaning dried blood with cleaning materials, that would make it easier to transfer.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that your first search could have been more thorough?
Aside from the carpet, yes. obviously.
You could have moved the furniture, you could have moved the bed, right?
Correct.
And that would have been a very thorough investigation if you had moved the bed?
It would have been a more thorough investigation, yes.
Because anything movable should have been moved in this case.
It could have been, yes.
I know you said this was your crime scene. Was anyone else at the crime scene directing you what to do?
Initially, no. And then as more, I guess, intel came in from the detectives, they would have us look for specific items and like clothing items.
So your crime scene became someone else's crime scene?
No, we just received additional information as far as what to look for.
And someone directed you on how to conduct your investigation?
No, I don't think so.
Or just one moment.
Sir?
Any further questions?
You redirect.
No, Your Honor.
I know the jury has questions for this witness.